Human took the blow intended for the alien girl, and her warriors marked him as a fallen champion. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Jason Matthews stood tall in the middle of the battlefield, his eyes focused on the chaos around him. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground beneath him trembled from the sounds of heavy footsteps and clashing weapons. His heart raced, but his mind was sharp, always calculating, always preparing for what came next. Elira, the alien warrior he had been assigned to protect, was locked in a fierce battle of her own, her glowing blue eyes scanning the enemies closing in on her. Despite the odds, she fought valiantly, striking with precision and power. But Jason knew that even the most skilled warriors could be overwhelmed. That's when it happened. A massive alien charged toward Elira, its body a hulking mass of muscle and armor. Without a moment's hesitation, Jason rushed forward, stepping into the path of the attack. The blow was meant for her, but he intercepted it, taking the hit squarely on his chest. The force of the strike sent him crashing to the ground, but he held his ground, refusing to let go of his weapon. Elira's eyes widened in disbelief, but before she could react, the enemy retreated, sensing that the tide was turning. Jason struggled to his feet, his breath ragged, but his resolve stronger than ever. He knew this was part of the sacrifice, part of the duty that came with being a protector. As he stood, the warriors of Elira's clan, who had been watching from the sidelines, approached. They were silent at first, their eyes scanning him with a mix of curiosity and respect. Then, one by one, they knelt before him, their leader speaking in a language he didn't fully understand but could sense the gravity of. They were marking him, not as just another soldier, but as one of their own, a fallen champion who had given everything to protect their leader. Jason felt a lump form in his throat, not from the physical pain, but from the overwhelming sense of honor. Elira approached, her gaze softening as she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've done more than I could ever ask," she said, her voice low and steady, filled with a gratitude that spoke volumes. For a moment, everything around them seemed to fade. The battle, the bloodshed, the chaos, none of it mattered. In that moment, it was just Jason and Elira, standing together amidst the storm. And in that moment, Jason realized that sometimes, the greatest victories weren't in the battles won, but in the sacrifices made along the way. "I've done what I had to do," Jason muttered, his voice gruff as he stood, the weight of the moment settling in his bones. His hand gripped his chest, where the pain from the blow was still fresh, but it was nothing compared to the sense of honor flooding him. As Elira and the warriors around him offered their respect, Jason allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, knowing he had done what was needed. The battle had subsided for now, but the true test was far from over. Elira turned to him, her features softer now, her gaze filled with admiration and something else, something deeper than gratitude. "You're more than just a soldier, Jason. You've proven that today." Her words felt like a heavy weight in his chest, the responsibility of protecting someone so valuable pressing on him. He nodded silently, still catching his breath, but aware of the eyes of Elira's people on him, their respect now etched into the air like a tangible force. Elira's warriors, her clan, stood a little taller, a little prouder, as they circled around him. There was something different in their demeanor now. They saw him not just as an outsider, not just as a human, but as one of them. One of their champions, even if only for a fleeting moment. Jason looked up at the stars above, the galaxy stretching endlessly in the night sky. There was a calmness that settled over him. His mission had always been simple, to protect Elira, to keep her safe in a world that was foreign to him, yet in that simplicity, he found a complexity he hadn't anticipated. Elira's warriors, the ones who had once eyed him with suspicion, now approached him with a newfound reverence. They offered him their weapons, swords and shields, symbols of their culture and their respect. Jason hesitated, not sure what to do with such a gesture. But Elira spoke first, her voice steady, strong. "Take them," she said. "You've earned them." Jason glanced at her, his mind still racing with everything that had happened in such a short time. The weight of the swords was not lost on him, their metal cold in his hands, but the weight of the moment was even heavier. He was now part of something much bigger than himself, a protector of a people who had once seen him as nothing more than a stranger. As they made their way back to the camp, Jason could feel the eyes of Illyra's warriors on him. They were silent, but their respect spoke louder than words. He walked by Illyra's side, their path lit by the faint glow of distant stars. There was a peace that settled between them, an understanding that wasn't there before. She had trusted him, and he had proven himself worthy of that trust. Illyra paused as they reached the campfire, the flickering flames casting shadows on their faces. "You show me something I didn't expect," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "I had no idea what humans were capable of until I saw you today." Jason met her gaze, the words hanging in the air between them. "I'm just doing my job," he replied, his voice steady. But inside, he knew it was more than that. He had given more than just his strength to protect her. He had given a piece of himself. Illyra stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. The connection between them, forged in battle and respect, was undeniable. Jason could feel the intensity of her gaze, the weight of her words, and he knew in that moment that his journey with her wasn't over. It had just begun. Jason stood by the campfire, the warmth of the flames battling the chill of the alien world. The battle was over, the immediate threat had passed, but something in the air had shifted. His body was bruised, aching, but he felt something deeper in his chest, a sense of duty fulfilled, of connection made. He had never expected to find himself in this situation. Standing here on this foreign planet, surrounded by beings who once saw him as an outsider. Yet, in the quiet moments between the chaos, he realized he was no longer just an observer. He had become part of something bigger than the battles he fought or the scars he bore. Illyra moved silently beside him, her presence steady and constant. The warriors of her clan had returned to their posts, the camp slowly returning to its normal rhythm, but the bond between them, forged in the heat of battle, lingered in the air. She approached him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You are more than just a human to us now," she said, her voice calm but filled with an emotion Jason couldn't quite place. "You've proven yourself, not just as a protector, but as someone who understands us, someone who stands with us, even when it costs everything." Jason looked at her, unsure of what to say. His role had always been clear: protector, get the job done, but the way she spoke, the way the warriors regarded him now, made him feel like his place here had changed. "I just did what needed to be done," he said simply, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew there was more to it than that. This wasn't just about duty. This was about something deeper, something that transcended species or duty. He had fought not just for survival, but for her people. And in doing so, he had found a part of himself he hadn't known was missing. Illyra studied him for a moment before nodding, as if understanding something unspoken between them. She took a step closer, her hand brushing his arm lightly. "We are not so different, you and I," she said softly. Jason felt his pulse quicken at her touch, but he forced himself to focus. This wasn't the time, not now, not after everything that had happened. But there was something undeniable in the way she looked at him, something more than gratitude, something that made him question the lines he had drawn between himself and the alien world around him. "We fight for those we care about," she continued, her eyes never leaving his. "And we fight for something greater than ourselves. That is what makes us strong." Jason nodded slowly, her words sinking into him like the weight of the sword he had carried into battle. This was about more than survival. It was about purpose, about standing together, even when the world around them seemed to be falling apart. Illyra stepped back, her expression softening. "Thank you, Jason," she said simply, her voice steady. "You've done more for us than you'll ever know." Jason didn't respond immediately, but as he looked at her, he realized that, for the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone. He had a purpose here, something worth fighting for. And as the fire crackled and the stars above them shimmered with the promise of an uncertain future, he felt a quiet sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of this world, part of her world, and that meant everything. The days that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. The camp had settled into a routine, and Jason found himself falling into a rhythm he had never expected. His primary duty remained the same, protect Illyra, but there was something more now. Illyra's warriors, who had once regarded him with suspicion, now treated him with a kind of respect he hadn't anticipated. They spoke to him not as an outsider but as an equal, one of their own. Despite the calm, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was building beneath the surface. The air around him felt charged, like the calm before a storm. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to pierce the sky, Illyra approached him again. Her presence was familiar now, and though her role as a warrior remained, there was something else in her gaze. Something that pulled him in. "You're quiet tonight," she remarked, her voice softer than usual. Jason glanced at her, his gaze lingering on her strong yet graceful form. "Just thinking," he said, though it was more than that. His thoughts were tangled, uncertain. He had always been a man of action, but here, on this alien world, everything felt different. The rules were changing, and so was he. Illyra stood beside him, her eyes reflecting the starry sky. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her tone gentle but with an edge of curiosity. Jason hesitated. His thoughts were his own, but something about her made him want to share. "I'm thinking about what you said the other day," he began slowly. "About fighting for something greater than ourselves." Illyra nodded, as though she understood exactly what he meant. "And what does that mean to you?" she asked, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to reach deep into him. Jason took a breath, looking out at the horizon. The landscape stretched endlessly before him, the quiet beauty of this alien world both comforting and intimidating. "It means that, maybe there's more to this than just survival," he said. "More than just protecting you or your people. Maybe it's about finding something worth fighting for, something bigger than any of us." Illyra was silent for a moment, her eyes scanning the night sky. Then, she spoke, her voice low but filled with a kind of understanding. "I think you've already found it," she said. Jason turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" Illyra smiled slightly, her eyes meeting his. "You found something worth fighting for, Jason. It's not just about duty. It's about the people you protect, the lives you touch. You've shown that." Jason's heart seemed to skip a beat. He had never thought of it that way. For the first time, he realized that his connection to this world, to Illyra, was deeper than just his role as a protector. It was personal. He wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting for something he cared about. Illyra reached out, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "You don't have to carry this burden alone, Jason. We fight together now." Her words resonated with him, echoing in his mind long after she had walked away. In that moment, Jason understood something he hadn't before. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of something bigger, something that mattered. And for the first time in a long while, Jason felt like he had a place in this world, a purpose beyond the battlefield. A purpose that, for the first time, he truly believed in. Days passed, and the quiet routine of camp life began to feel more like a second home to Jason. He spent his days training, reinforcing his bond with Illyra's warriors, and learning more about the ways of this alien world. The nights were filled with peaceful moments by the campfire, where Jason and Illyra would often sit together, talking about everything and nothing. As time went on, the space between them, once filled with duty and formality, slowly dissolved into something more natural, something that Jason couldn't quite define. One evening, as the first stars appeared in the sky, Illyra approached him. The air was cooler now, a sign of the changing seasons on the planet. She had that familiar look in her eyes, the same one she had when they first met, but now there was something softer in her gaze, something that told Jason there was more to her thoughts than she was willing to share. "You've been quiet lately," she said, settling down beside him. "What's on your mind?" Jason glanced at her, the flickering flames reflecting in her eyes. He had thought about it often, about what he was really doing here, about what he was becoming. But it was hard to put into words. "Just thinking," he replied. "About everything. About why we fight, and what it really means." Illyra tilted her head slightly, her expression thoughtful. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice calm, patient. Jason took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. I used to think it was all about survival. Just doing my job, protecting people. But now, I'm not so sure. It feels like there's more to it, something bigger than just fighting. Like, maybe it's about finding a cause worth fighting for. Something that makes all of this, he gestured around them, the camp, the stars above, the warriors moving in the distance. Meaningful. Elira was silent for a moment, her eyes on the fire, and Jason couldn't help but notice the way the light danced on her features. You've changed, Jason, she said softly. When you first arrived, you were distant. Focused only on your duty. But now, you see things differently. You see us differently. Jason shook his head, a faint smile crossing his lips. I never thought I'd be here, doing this, he admitted. But I think you're right. I've been seeing everything through a different lens. Elira's smile was small but genuine. And that's why you belong here, she said, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. You don't just fight for survival, Jason. You fight because you believe in something. You fight for what's worth protecting. Her words hit him harder than he expected, settling deep in his chest. He had come to this world as a soldier, a protector of someone else's mission, but now he understood he wasn't just here to fight. He was here to make a difference. Thank you, Elira, Jason said, his voice filled with gratitude. Elira looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, she reached out, placing her hand on his arm in a gesture of understanding, of solidarity. You've done more than I could ever ask for, she said softly. And I will fight alongside you, always. The fire crackled between them, the sound of it filling the silence as they sat there, side by side, knowing that their path ahead was uncertain but no longer as daunting as it once seemed. Together, they would face whatever came their way. And for the first time in a long while, Jason felt a peace settle over him, a peace that came from knowing he was not alone, not in this fight, not in this life. The days that followed were marked by a sense of calm, a quiet that Jason had not experienced since arriving on this alien world. Elira and the warriors, now fully accepting him as one of their own, continued their training and patrols, but there was an underlying understanding that their lives were no longer just about survival. They were working together to build something stronger, something more than just a fleeting alliance. The bond between Jason and Elira deepened each day, not through words, but through actions. As they walked side by side, Jason found himself sharing more with her than he ever had with anyone else. They spoke less of battle plans and more of dreams, of hopes for a future where they didn't have to fight, where peace could settle over their world. Jason had always been a man of action, but with Elira, he began to understand that sometimes, the smallest moments carried the greatest weight. One evening, as they sat by the campfire, Elira spoke up, her voice softer than usual. Jason, do you ever think about what comes next? She asked. Jason paused, considering her question. He had been so focused on the present, on the fight and the responsibility that weighed on his shoulders, that he hadn't allowed himself to think beyond the next day. What do you mean? He asked, his voice steady but curious. Elira looked up at the stars, her eyes reflecting the distant lights above. We've been through so much. But after the fighting stops, what then? Jason felt a tug in his chest. It was a question he had avoided, the one thing that haunted him when the noise of battle faded. I don't know, he admitted. I've never been one to plan for the future. I just take things as they come. Elira smiled slightly, her gaze still on the stars. I've always been the same, she said, her voice carrying a quiet strength. But I wonder if there's more to life than just surviving. The words hung in the air between them, a shared understanding that was both comforting and unsettling. Jason had always lived his life with one purpose, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. But now, with Elira by his side, he felt the stirrings of something else. Something bigger than just duty. Maybe we'll find out together, he said softly, the promise of the words more real than he had expected. Elira turned to him then, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. Maybe we will, she replied. As the fire crackled in the background, Jason realized that this was the first time in a long while that he felt truly alive. Not because of the battles he fought or the victories he claimed, but because of the possibility of a future that was yet to be written. And for the first time, Jason allowed himself to believe in it, in the future they could build together. The road ahead was uncertain, but with Elira by his side, he was no longer afraid to walk it. They had already proven that together, they could face anything the universe threw at them. And now, they would face the unknown future, together. The days had grown longer as the season shifted, and Jason found himself adapting to this new life in ways he hadn't expected. The rhythms of the alien world became more familiar to him, and with each passing day, his connection to Elira and her people grew deeper. What had once felt like a duty now felt like a purpose that extended beyond the battlefield. It was a strange feeling for him, a man who had always measured his worth in victories and defeats, but now, he found his worth in the bonds he had forged. One evening, as the air grew cooler and the first hints of dusk settled over the camp, Jason found himself standing on the edge of a cliff, looking out at the vast, unfamiliar landscape. The wind rustled through the tall grass, and the distant sound of the river below mixed with the calls of alien creatures. It was peaceful here, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Elira appeared beside him, her steps quiet but confident. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice carrying the same steady calm that had come to define her. Jason turned to look at her, his gaze lingering on the strength in her posture, the way she stood at ease despite the dangers that surrounded them. "I'm thinking about how far we've come," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I used to think everything was about the fight, about surviving. But now it feels like there's more to it. Like there's something worth protecting here." Elira studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable, but Jason could see the shift in her eyes, the understanding that passed between them. "You found your place," she said simply. Jason nodded, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "I think I have." The silence between them wasn't awkward, but comfortable, like two people who had found something in each other that they didn't expect. Elira stepped closer, her presence like a steady force beside him. "What do you see in the future?" she asked, her voice softer now, as though the question held a weight that neither of them had truly considered. Jason glanced at her, feeling the gravity of the moment. He had never been one to look too far ahead, always living in the now, but Elira's question made him think. "I see us," he said after a long pause. "I see a future where we don't have to fight, where we can build something from what we've started. I see a life where we're not just surviving, but living. Together." The words felt strange coming from him, but they were true. There was a part of him, deep down, that wanted this, wanted a future where his life wasn't defined by the chaos of war, but by something more peaceful, more lasting. Elira's expression softened, her eyes meeting his with a depth that Jason hadn't seen before. "Together," she echoed, the word carrying a weight of its own. They stood there in silence for a moment, the wind blowing gently between them, the sound of the river growing louder in the distance. It was a moment of peace, of understanding, that felt like a promise between them. A promise of something more. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, Jason realized that the future was no longer just a distant thought. It was something real, something he could reach for, and for the first time in a long while, he believed in it. In them. And in the possibility of what they could build together. The days continued to pass with a gentle, almost peaceful rhythm. The sounds of the camp at night had become familiar to Jason, and for the first time, he found himself not counting the minutes, not waiting for the next battle to begin. He was learning to appreciate the stillness, to find peace in the moments between the chaos. Elira was a constant presence beside him, her strength and resolve never wavering, but there was something more now. Their connection had grown deeper, not just from shared battles, but from shared dreams. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the soft crackle of burning wood filling the air, Elira spoke up. "Do you ever miss home?" Her question caught Jason off guard, and for a moment, he was silent. "I don't know if I miss home, exactly," he said, his voice thoughtful. "I miss what home used to be. But it feels different now." Elira nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I understand," she said softly. "Home isn't just a place. It's who you're with, what you're fighting for. It's something that changes." Jason turned to look at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had spent so much of his life focused on what was in front of him on the next mission, the next battle, that he had never thought much about what he was fighting for beyond survival. But now, with Alira by his side, it felt like he was fighting for something more. "I think you're right," he said slowly. "Maybe home is here, with all of you. With you." Alira smiled, a small, quiet smile, and Jason could see the depth of emotion behind it. "And what happens when the fighting stops?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. Jason had thought about that question before. They had both spoken about a future where they didn't have to fight anymore, but the idea of it was still foreign to him. The warrior's life had been all he knew. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I think we figure it out. Together." Alira's smile widened, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow around them. They weren't just warriors anymore. They were something more. Together, they could face whatever came next, not as soldiers, but as partners. The night grew deeper, the fire crackling as it burned low, and Jason realized that in that quiet moment, something had shifted. He was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting for a future. A future with Alira. The wind stirred the trees around them, a soft whisper in the stillness of the night. And as the stars shone overhead, Jason knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side, with strength, with courage, and with the unspoken promise that they would never have to face it alone. The days began to blend together in a way that Jason had never experienced before. Time felt different here, in this place that had once been so foreign to him. He had come to this world as an outsider, a soldier with a clear mission, but now, as he walked alongside Alira and her people, he realized that his mission had evolved. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about something much deeper. Alira's warriors had become his comrades, their bonds forged not just through the heat of battle, but through shared purpose and respect. And with each passing day, the sense of belonging that had eluded him for so long began to take root. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the camp, Alira approached Jason. Her silhouette against the rising sun was a picture of strength and grace, and for a moment, Jason simply watched her, feeling a quiet sense of peace settle over him. "We're ready," she said, her voice steady and calm. Jason furrowed his brow. "Ready for what?" he asked. Alira smiled, her eyes reflecting the same confidence that had defined her from the moment they had met. "Ready to take the next step," she said, her gaze meeting his. Jason's heart skipped a beat. The weight of her words hung in the air between them, and for the first time, he felt a deep sense of clarity. He knew exactly what she meant. The battles they had fought, the bonds they had formed, had all led to this moment, the moment when they would build something lasting, something beyond the chaos of war. "Together," Jason said, the word falling from his lips without hesitation. Alira nodded, her expression softening. "Together," she echoed. It was a promise, an unspoken commitment that both of them knew would guide them forward. As they stood there, side by side, the world around them seemed to shift. The camp that had once been a place of conflict and uncertainty now felt like a home, a place where they could finally put down roots. Jason realized that the future they had spoken of was no longer just a distant dream. It was a reality within their grasp. The road ahead would not be easy. There would still be challenges, obstacles to overcome, but Jason was no longer afraid. With Alira by his side, he knew that they could face whatever came their way. And for the first time in a long while, he believed that the future was worth fighting for, not just for survival, but for the promise of something better. Together, they would forge their path, not as soldiers, but as partners, as allies, as something greater than the sum of their parts. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its warm glow over the camp, Jason turned to Alira, his heart full of hope and determination. "Let's go," he said, and without another word, they began walking toward the future, side by side.